welcome. Have any elk hunters here? 1, 2, 3, 4. Dutch oven cooking's down the hall. All right, how many elk hunters we have here? I want to see hands. All right. We're going to take a little quiz, make sure you're an elk hunter before we get started. We put some posts out on our Facebook page, the Elk 101 forums, and we said, you might be an elk hunter if ... This is what some of the people said. You might be an elk hunter if you mow your grass in your hunting boots and a 70-pound pack on your back. Anybody do that? All right, we'll try another one. You call the kids in for dinner with an elk bugle. All right, there we go. We got an elk hunter here. You might be an elk hunter if your most expensive clothes you own are camouflage. Yeah, I'm in that boat. If you think the smell of elk urine is far better than the smell of your wife's $250 perfume. Those of you who are here with your wife, don't raise your hand. You might be an elk hunter if your one and only rule for setting the wedding date is not in September. Or you plan the births of your children for any month but September.
Sure, raise your hand.
You might be an elk hunter if you spend more time raking trees than you did raking your lawn this last year. Or if you shave with a piranha. You might be an elk hunter if you have a urine scent wafer hanging from your rearview mirror. Or you have more pictures of elk in your wallet than of your family. And the last one, you might be an elk hunter if you have a hoochie mama in your hands and your wife is okay with it. So now let me ask, how many elk hunters do we have here? All right, who's excited for elk season? Who's depressed that it's still 6.5 months away? Man, Wyoming draws came out this week. We found out we drew. I was all excited, and then I realized I have 7 months to sit and think about it. But I'm not going to sit and think about it. I'm going to get ready for it. So that's what we're going to talk about today, how we can work in the off-season to be confident so when September gets here, we're ready for it, as well as what do we do in September so that we're confident and we know that we can go out there and have success. Now, if you're a public land, do-it-yourself type elk hunter, especially on over-the-counter general hunts, average success rate is about 10%. It means 9 out of 10 of you sitting in this room right here are going to fail at elk hunting this year. How many like the sound of that? I don't like it. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure I'm above average. I may not be able to kill an elk every year. My goal is to be able to do that. I'm going to push towards that. I'm going to share with you some of the things that I've learned over 25 years of elk hunting that help me be successful in the field. Now, before we go any farther, I'm going to say this. I am not a professional hunter. I'm not an expert elk hunter. I'm a regular guy who has a job, who has a family, who has a bunch of responsibilities. My passion is for elk hunting, though. So what I tell you today is my experience. It's not the right way. It's not the only way. It's not the perfect way to do it. It's not a guarantee. It's just sharing my experiences with you in the hopes that you're able to take something away from it, whether it's motivation, whether it is a little tip or a little tactic that might help you in September to get you a little bit closer to that consistent success that we're all striving for. So when you walk away from here, I don't want you to say, I'm going to go out and do it just like he did and I'm going to be successful, and then when you fail, come back and say, man, that system was not good. I just want you to be able to say, hey, I learned something today, I'm going to add that and see if it works. See if I can add it to something I learned from someone else, and overall make myself a better elk hunter. Now when it comes to elk hunting, I think it's very important to be in good shape. I also think it's very important to be a good elk caller. I think it's important to scout. But I don't think any one of those things are most important. You can be the best elk caller in the world, but if you can't get up the mountain to where the elk are, it's not going to do you any good. You can be in the best shape of your life, but if you didn't shoot your bow all summer, you don't know how to use elk calls, all you're going to be doing is going on a hike. So it's a combination of all those things. It's a comprehensive package, the whole thing coming together, that perfect balance where you're spending time on all of it rather than devoting your whole life to weightlifting or devoting your whole life to elk calling or whatever it is. Putting it all together and getting a good balanced approach, you're going to be far more effective. So we're going to jump into it. What it boils down to, in my opinion, is confidence. It's not being an expert in any certain area of elk hunting. It's being confident in your abilities. And that includes all of those aspects. So we're going to talk about confidence and how confidence equals success. And when you become confident in your abilities to go out there and elk hunt, I'm not talking arrogant. I'm not talking going out there and saying, I can kill an elk. I've killed an elk the last 2 years. I know I'm going to kill another one. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to kill an elk. I'm confident. I can shoot my bow. I know that if I have an opportunity, I'm going to hit. I know that if there's an elk in that canyon, I'm going to get him to bugle at me, and I'm going to be in good enough shape to go after him. And I'm going to know what to do when I set up. I'm going to know how to call him in so that I'm going to be successful. That kind of confidence. Vince Lombardi said the difference between a successful person and others is not a lack of strength, not a lack of knowledge, but rather a lack of will. That desire to want to be successful, that pushes you right now, 7 months away from elk season. What did you do this morning to make yourself a better elk hunter? That's what we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about physical conditioning. It's something I feel is very important. There's a craze out there right now. You have to be in top shape, all this. It's very important to be physically fit when it comes to elk hunting. They usually don't live in the flatlands. It's not sitting in a tree stand. Nothing wrong with hunting like that. But when it comes to elk hunting and elk hunting do-it-yourself, over-the-counter, general type hunts, you've got to work for it. And if you're in good shape, it's going to make that work a little bit easier. We're going to talk about basic elk hunting knowledge. What are the elk doing during the day? Where are we going to find them? How are we going to set up on them? How are we going to make our approach towards them? We're going to talk about setting up and calling. I think setting up, if I had to pick one area that most of my hunts fail, it's in my setup. I didn't have a shooting lane. The wind wasn't good. All of these things that you have to take into consideration for your setup. We're going to talk a lot about that. We're going to talk about once you get set up and you have an elk there, how do you get him close? How do you call him in? What calls do we use? We're going to talk about post-success. I don't know how many people I've heard say, I went elk hunting for the first time, or it took me 10 years to shoot my first elk, and when I did, I wasn't ready. I don't know if I'm going back next year. That was a lot of work. So we're going to talk about what we can do to be prepared and confident, so when we are successful, it doesn't make it a whole lot more harder or a whole lot more difficult than it already is. Then we're going to talk about reliable gear. How many of you think gear plays a part in your success? I don't think gear plays a part in my success. But being confident in my gear. I could go out there and hunt in a red wool jacket, just like my grandpa did. I could go out there and hunt in jeans. I could probably kill an elk. But I'd be miserable if it rained. I wouldn't be confident to be able to say, if I drop in that hole, there's a chance that I might spend the night down there tonight. I wouldn't be confident to do that. So gear plays into my confidence. I could still kill elk with a cheap bow. I could still kill elk wearing my Walmart tennis shoes that I wore all through college that I loved because they were lightweight and they were cheap and I could buy a new pair every 2 weeks. I could still do that. But gear makes me comfortable. It gives me that confidence to be able to push a little bit farther. I'm going to jump right into physical conditioning. I am not going to spend a lot of time. You guys okay if I'm down here on the ground? I don't like standing up there. I like being down here. So physical conditioning, I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through what we personally do. Everyone in this room is at a different stage in their life. Your age, your health, your abilities, all of that. So for me to stand up here and say, well, you need to run 4 triathlons this summer, you need to do a half marathon, you need to be able to squat 450 pounds, that's not going to be accurate, and it's not going to help you. What I will say is wherever you are today, wherever you're at physically today, be better tomorrow. Be better in September. Set a goal. You know where you're at. You know what it takes to be in the elk woods and to be comfortable and to be able to hike and chase those elk for a week straight. Set that goal today and achieve it. You have 7 months. It's plenty of time. If you wait till August 1st, you're running out of time. That window is very, very close to being shut August 1st. Start today and stick with it. The problem most of us have is January 1st, we get all excited about the new year. My resolution is to get in shape this year. And we go and we buy a membership at the gym and we go there every day for about 2 weeks. And then pretty soon something comes up and we're going 3 times a week. And then a few other things come up and my son starts lacrosse next week. It's going to be tough. That's 3 nights a week. So get to the gym. I'm down to 2 nights a week. And you know what? I'm just going to wait until August and I'm going to hit it then. It happens to all of us. We're all busy. We all have schedules. We all have things that are going to take over. So set a realistic goal. Don't tell yourself, I'm going to the gym every day until September, knowing that you can't achieve that. Set a realistic goal, formulate a plan, and then achieve it, and you can do it. And as long as you're in better shape in September than you are today, you've been successful. Now we know what kind of country elk live in. We know how hard it is to look at that mountain and say, I've got to be up there and I've got to be there in about 30 minutes because the wind's going to be switching. If I'm not there, it's going to blow the elk out. You'll look up there and tell yourself, I can do it. Plays a big part in the mental part of the game of elk hunting. Or to stand on the edge of a canyon and look down there and hear an elk bugling mile and a half down the bottom of that canyon. You look at your watch and you say, I've got an hour and a half of daylight left. I know it's going to be dark when I come out. I know it's going to be a big hike out of there, and if I kill something, it's going to be a 2-day process. But I'm in shape, and that's what I came here to do, and I'm going to do it. Be consistent in your workouts. That's the most important thing. Don't quit. Set your goal and be consistent. Cameron Haynes wrote an article in Extreme Elk Magazine and said, the more work, sacrifice, and dedication you offer up in the name of bow hunting, the more success you will have. These are not my thoughts. This is a fact. And I agree. the more that you're willing to sacrifice, and I'm not talking sacrifice, time away from your family, just the more that you're willing to say, every night I sit down and I watch TV for 30 minutes. Instead of doing that, I'm going to go and I'm going to do push-ups and sit-ups. I'm going to go for a jog out around the neighborhood. You have the time. We all have the time. It's just making sure that we set that time aside and be consistent in it. And that's all I'm going to say on physical conditioning. Set your goals, be realistic, and achieve it. Be in better shape in September. So we did a survey on elk101.com, and we found out that 61% of those who responded said that hunting knowledge contributes to their success more than any other factor. And 2/3 of them said hunting knowledge is gained only through experience. So I'm sorry to say you came here today and I'm not going to be able to help you too much. Experience is what's going to gain that elk hunting knowledge for you. You can read magazines, you can read books, you can come to seminars, watch DVDs, watch TV, do all of that stuff. But the way most of us learn best is by doing it and by failing. I have failed so many more times in elk hunting than I've been successful, it's not even worth coming up with a statistic for it. You're going to fail. The key is to learn from those failures. We all fail. It's a matter of understanding what went wrong and applying it better next time. And so hopefully I'll be able to point out a few things. Michael Jordan said, I failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed. And as an elk hunter, that's probably the truest statement we can say. The reason that we're successful is because we failed at it. And I'm talking consistently successful. Somebody can go out, we can go out, and every once in a while have blind luck and kill an elk. But when you want year in, year out success, it comes from failing, and it comes from learning from those failures. So we're going to talk about elk senses, wind currents, and elk habits. Those are three things that I feel are very, very important when it comes to just collecting some knowledge on elk hunting. A lot of you might be saying, yeah, that's basic, keep the wind in your face. Elk are going to be bedding down in the mornings, they're going to be feeding in the evenings. They're going to, their senses are going to smell you, and if they do, it's over. Very basic stuff, but a lot of times when we're out in the woods, we forget about that. How many of you have had another hunter come in with the wind blowing right from him to the elk, bugling the whole way, thinking he's going to get in on that elk that you're set up on? Happens to me every year. Public land, there's other hunters there we're competing with, and that guy comes walking down the trail with the wind blowing right at the elk's bugling at me, we're set up on it, and here he comes walking in bugling. It's like, wasn't he thinking about the wind? That's basic. I carry a wind detector in my pocket, and it's in my hand 50% of the time when I'm hunting, because I'm checking that wind continually. That elk smells me, it's over. Well, elk senses are incredibly important. They spend every hour of their life, every minute of every day trying to stay alive. That's their goal. They're trying to survive, and they use their senses to do that. When I go out in the woods, I like to become nothing. You hear talk about elk sense as far as cow and heat sense or different things, pine boughs, pine scents, whatever you want to do. I like to smell like nothing, because in my opinion, if you're wearing a scent wafer around your neck, that's great. It might smell just like a cow in heat, but if the wind's blowing that scent to the elk, it's blowing your scent to the elk too. And he might smell that wafer and get all excited, but he's going to smell your scent also, and he's going to get really excited to go the other way. If they smell danger, even if they smell something that they want to come check out, if they smell danger, they're going to leave. So I like to smell like nothing. I use scent protector, scent shield, whatever it is, knowing that that's not going to be 100% effective, but if it buys me just a little bit more of an advantage, then I'm good to go. I know that if that wind's blown to that elk, though, the game's over. So when we talk about senses, there's three senses elk have: hearing, sight, and smell. So they're looking for sounds, they're looking for movement, and they're looking for smell. What sounds are okay to make? When you're in the elk woods, a lot of times we hear elk and they're loud. They're going through brush and we know there's a herd of elk there. If they hear that same sound, it's probably not going to spook them too bad. They're going to know you're there though. So when's it okay to make sounds? When's it not okay? For me, I don't like to make noise. That's an unnatural sound. Rubbing my backpack against brush, my bugle tube hitting against a tree. Those are sounds that alert the elk that something's not right. When you hear elk walk across a hillside of shale or rocks, they sound a lot different than we do when we walk across it. I try to be quiet when I'm doing that. But when I'm set up, if I'm the caller back behind, I've got a shooter out in front, I'm bugling, I'm cow calling, I'm doing all that, they know where I'm at. It's okay for me to break some branches. It's okay to rake a tree. Those sounds are okay. But what I don't want to do is cough. I don't want to hit my bugle tube against the tree and make a loud, unnatural sound, because that alerts the elk that there's something wrong. When it comes to sight, movement's the key. If they see movement, they know you're there. They know something's there. And they've been hearing this cow call or this bugle, and they're going to look and they're going to see movement, they don't see an elk there, they're expecting to see an 800-pound animal, they're going to get really nervous really quick. And their sight is usually a backup. It's something that they hear something and they look to visually recognize. Or they smell something and they look to see if there's danger there. Sight's not too critical in my opinion. If you blend into your surroundings and if you don't move, an elk's probably not going to get too nervous about coming in. Unless he comes in and he looks right at you, he's like, something's not right there. I just saw something move and I'm not able to detect what it is. He's going to get nervous. Like I said, they spend every minute of their life trying to stay alive, and they aren't going to take chances very often. The last one is the most important. That's the sense of smell. And that's the one you have to avoid. If they smell you, I have very, very, very rarely had an elk stick around and be able to keep working him once he smelled me. He knows what's going on. He knows I'm there. He knows there's danger in the area, and he's typically not going to participate too much longer. So what I do is I play the wind continually, and it's a really tough game to play because it changes. It's not consistent. There's a pattern to it that you can try to follow, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of luck involved. But knowing a few things about what the wind and basics of thermals are will help you set up and help you approach those elk and hopefully maximize your chances. But at the end of the day, like I said, you can have everything great. The wind's coming down consistent. You got this bull coming in. He's at 30 yards. You just take one more step, and you feel the wind at the back of your neck. There's nothing else you could have done there, except for go and find another one and do it again. So wind currents, I know it's kind of hard to see there, but we've got the bow hunter up on the hillside, the elk over on the other hillside. It's you can't see the little symbol from Google Earth, but north is to the right. It's 7 o'clock in the morning. I've got pictures of this area, an area that we hunt, and I've got different times, 7 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock. What's the wind doing in there? What's it doing at 7 o'clock in the morning? Well, it's usually coming down. The draws are cooler, the hillsides are warmer, that air's coming down the hill, it's pulling down. That sun comes up, starts warming up the hillside, starts going back up. So knowing that, knowing the area, being able to say that wind's coming down, the main current's coming down this canyon and coming into the bottom, I spend a lot of time on Google Earth studying thermals of areas. And I look at what time the sun's coming up. I say, okay, when the sun comes up, I've got 40 minutes until the thermals switch and it starts pulling uphill. If I'm sitting there at 9:30 and there's an elk bugling down in this hole, I know I've only got to wait about 5 more minutes and the wind's going to switch and then I can get down there. And it's all relative. Every day, if there's cloud cover, it's going to prolong it. If it's hotter during late August, early September, it's going to change that. But the basics of it, knowing that, is going to help me know where I need to be, know how I can approach the elk, and maximize my efficiency when it comes to the wind. So an elk habit, during the day, what's an elk doing? And this is very relative again. If you're hunting in the high country of Colorado, sometimes those elk are bedding at timberline and they're coming up in the morning above timberline to feed and then they're going back down to bed. But typically an elk's habit is going to be that it spends its night down lower country, the bottoms of the draws, where there's water, where there's cover, where there's feed. They come down there, they rut all night, and then as the sun comes up in the morning, they're going to be moving their way back up the mountain. They're going to go a certain distance. It may be several miles. It may be a few hundred yards. They're going to move up the mountain. They're going to find a north-facing slope where there's a little bit shady. They've got cover. They're protected, and they're going to bed down there for the day. And then in the evening, they're going to get up about 5, 6 o'clock, and they're going to do the opposite. They're going to come back down the mountain. They're going to work their way down to those lower countries, and about the time it gets, half hour, 45 minutes before dark, they're going to feed around there. They're going to spend the night rutting there. They're going to get water. They're going to spend the night, and the next morning they're going to go back up. So that's a very generalized pattern of what the elk are doing, and there's a reason for it. We talked about thermals. What's a thermal doing in the morning typically? It's coming down. The elk are down in the low country, down in the bottoms of the draws, the scent's coming down. So any danger above them, they're going to know about. And about half hour before the thermals switch, they're going to turn, they're going to start making their way up the mountain. Thermals are still in their face. Anything that's in front of them, they're going to smell. They know if there's danger in front of them. They're on the move going up, so anything behind them is going to have to be chasing them. That's you and me. And then about time that the thermals switch, the sun comes up, warms up the hillside, the thermals switch, they get to their bedding area and they bed down. And there's a reason for that. That's because everything behind them, all those thermals come up the mountain now, and they know if anything's been following them up the mountain. They use the wind all the time. They bed in an area where they're probably going to be able to see above them, or they're going to be able to have a lot of thick cover, a lot of downfall, thick brush, that they're going to be able to hear something coming above them. They're going to be able to smell something coming from below them. In the evening, they get up again, well, the thermals are still coming up the hill, and they start their way back down. Anything below them, they're going to smell and know if there's danger, they're going to be able to avoid it. About the time they get down there in that low country to start feeding is about the time the thermals switch. brings the scent from behind them down into that low country, and again, they smell anything that's been following them down the hill. Knowing that is incredibly powerful. Are you going to follow an elk straight up the mountain at 9:30 knowing that that thermal is going to switch in 10 minutes and you're going to be behind them? Probably not. You're going to want to get over a ridge. You want to get over a ridge and parallel them up there and sit up there until that wind switches and then get above them and come in. Because the last thing you want to do is spend 4 hours in the morning hiking straight up a mountain to get in on the elk, and you get 200 yards from the time the thermals switch and they smell you and it's game over. If you'd have been over another ridge parallel to them and waited another 5 minutes, got around above them, it's game on again. So, very simple, but very, very powerful information to have. When it comes to setups, like I mentioned, most of my failures happen in the setup. Whether it's me drawing my bow back and breaking brush because I didn't break it off before and the elk hears that or sees that movement. Whether it's setting up behind a tree and the elk comes into 20 yards and he's broadside and I'm at full draw but I have no shot because I have no lanes. Whether it's I didn't take time to range some trees and different things out in front of me so I know the distance, and that elk comes into 35 yards and I guess him for 45 and I shoot over his back. Whatever it is, a lot of my mistakes happen in the setup. So we'll talk about 3 keys to being effective in our setup. The first one is how we approach the elk. The second one is how we set up on the elk. And then lastly, how we get that elk in close enough for a shot. When it comes to approach, we've talked about wind over and over, and it's worth stressing again here. When I locate an elk, whether it's by bugling, spotting, however I find that elk, my goal is to get in close to that elk. And when I do that, I have my wind detector in my hand continually, and I want to know what those thermals are doing the whole way that I'm going in there, whether it's going sideways, whether it's going straight at him, coming towards me. I want to know what it's doing. I want to know if it's swirling. I want to be able to say when I get to the top of that ridge, I've got a consistent pattern here, or I need to stay 40 yards down on the hillside because it's cooler down in the trees and the thermals are still going down. If I get on the ridge, it's moving up. I want to know that as I approach that elk. It's going to help me when I set up. And then I want to get in really close to him. So if I'm on a ridge, I bugle, a bull answers from 600 yards away, I'm going to sit there for a little bit. I'm going to look down and be like, yeah, it sounds like he's by that open hillside, or he's by that rock, or he's by that snag. So I want to get in close to that snag or that rock. I don't want to get right to it, but I want to get close, and I want to get within 100 or 150 yards if I can. But here's the trick. I don't want to call anymore once I leave. I want to be able to know well enough where he's at that I can go straight there and get in on him. And that's tough if they're moving. If you've got a bull that's following a herd of cows up the canyon, it's tough to do that. You're going to have to make a few more calls as you go in there. But if I can get in when that bull stops moving and he's getting ready to bed down or he's feeding early in the morning, my chances of being able to move in and get close to him are really good. So my goal is to get within 100 to 150 yards. I call that the bull's bedroom, the red zone, whatever you want to call it. You just want to get close to where he's uncomfortable and he finds out there's another elk there. So before we go too much farther, I only use 3 elk calls, 3 different sounds when I'm elk hunting. Very simple approach to calling in elk. The first one is location bugle. So when I'm up high on the ridge, like in that picture, I'm going to throw a location bugle out there and I'm going to try to get a response. It's just a very basic bugle. There's nothing aggressive about it. It's just 2 or 3 notes. It hits that high note, holds it a long time, it carries out there and echoes. My only goal is to have an elk hear that. And when they hear it, I don't want them to feel threatened. I want them to just think, hey, there's an elk up there saying, hey, what's going on? I'm going to answer them and say the same thing. So a location bugle sounds like this. Hold that high note, it's clear, it carries a long ways, it's loud, but there's nothing aggressive about it. And the elk know that. They can tell the emotion in your bugle. They know you're just saying, hey, I'm down here, I'm up here. They're going to answer back, hopefully. That's the goal. So a location bugle is good for locating them. Then I get in close. From there, that's where it gets really important. Number one thing that I will say about setups is hunt with a partner. If you want to have the most effective and most efficient advantage over these elk, hunt with a partner. If you try doing it solo, which I love doing that every once in a while, I love just going out by myself and calling an elk and trying to shoot an elk. But I know my odds are a lot lower when I do that than when I hunt with a partner. Now that doesn't mean just put a Craigslist post out there and say elk hunting partner wanted. Anybody will do. I just need somebody to go with me. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking find somebody that has a common goal that you do, that hunts the same style you do, that's willing to work out the same amount of time you are, to push each other, motivate each other. Because the last thing you want to do is spend 5 days a week working out for 9 months and then show up at elk hunting camp and your buddy's 40 pounds overweight. He's like, I can't go, I'm sleeping in tomorrow. I don't care if I kill him, I just wanted a week's vacation to get away from work. That doesn't fit your style. I see a bunch of you elbowing your partners. Find someone that hunts the same style you do, that shares the same goals, that wants to be successful as bad as you do. Find somebody that you want them to be as successful as you want to be yourself. If you hunt together as a team, your success rate is going to skyrocket. If you hunt together and you think about me, I want to be the one out shooting, I want to be the one that gets the first shot, you aren't going to be as successful. So find somebody that you can formulate a team with, that you're just as happy for them when they shoot an elk as you are when you get one, or even more so. And your success will skyrocket. And there's two reasons for that. Number one, you're able to do the shooter-caller setup, we call it, the two-man setup. We have a shooter out in front, you have the caller back behind him, and that caller's goal is to bring that bull across in front of the shooter. The elk does not even know the shooter's there. So that gives him a huge advantage. He's able to draw his bow. The elk's not looking for him at that point. He's looking past him, looking for that elk that he hears back behind. You get a lot better shot opportunities when you do that. That bull, how many times have we had a bull come in, bugling great, he comes into about 80 or 90 yards and he hangs up. That's the most frustrating thing and the most common thing I run into is that bull hanging up out there at 80 or 90 yards. And there's a few reasons for that. We'll talk about that and how we can overcome it. But when you've got that caller back behind you as the shooter, he's hanging up 80 or 90 yards from the caller. If you're 60 yards out in front of him, that's where you want him. That's where you want him hanging up, is 30 yards away. That's a high percentage shot. The great basketball coach John Wooden said, it's amazing how much can be accomplished if no one cares who gets the credit. When you're hunting as a team, that's the way it works. I don't care who shoots it, we shot it. Our team killed an elk today. We were successful. And tomorrow, I know my buddy who shot that elk is going to be back calling, and he wants me to be successful. And we're going to be successful. So hunting with a partner is, if I can tell you one thing that you want to do to increase your odds, hunt smart with a partner. And then remember the elk senses. Remember sight, smell, and sound. When you're setting up, think about those three things. When that elk comes in, is he going to smell me? When that elk comes in, is he going to see me? When that elk comes in, is he going to hear me? As the shooter out in front, you don't want him to do any of those things. So a few things that I like to do when I set up. I set up on the same level as the elk. We talked about the elk coming in and hanging up at 90 yards. There's a reason for that. If they're above us, they can see a lot better than we can see. So you know how it is when you're up on a mountain, you're looking down, you can see a long ways down that mountain. You go down 100 yards and turn around and look up, you can't see near as far. Same as for the elk. If they come in above you, they can stop and look down and they don't see an elk down there at 90 or 100 yards. They're going to be pretty nervous. Likewise, or opposite, if they're coming in from below you, you're up above them, you're bugling at them, they think there's an 800-pound elk up there that's pretty mad right now. And I'm down here below him on this steep hillside. He's got a huge physical advantage over me. If I go storming up there, he comes storming down, he's got the advantage. So a lot of times bulls will circle around and get on the same level as you to come in and feel more comfortable coming in. If you can do that, it just makes them more comfortable from the start. So I like to get on the same level as them. The other reason I like to get on the same level of them is for the wind. Typically your thermals are blowing up or downhill. Very seldom, unless there's a storm or something, are they going to be blowing sideways across the hill. So if I get on the same level as that bull, and the wind's blowing downhill, and all of a sudden it switches, if he's off to the side of me 100 yards, it's not nearly as critical if the wind just switched for me. So I like to get on the same level. The other thing I like to remember is the arc. And the arc stands for two things. First thing it stands for is always remember concealment. So I always remember sight, sound, smell. And the second thing is if I'm the shooter, I've got a collar back behind me, I draw a straight line, an imaginary line from the collar that goes out to the elk. That's the straight path that elk's going to come in on. But he doesn't come in on a straight path very often. If that wind's blowing downhill across that arc, remember I'm on the same level, I've got a straight line going across the hillside, the wind's coming straight down perpendicular, that bull's typically going to swing downhill. He's going to swing downhill so he can smell. Maybe there's danger up there. I don't trust this elk sound. I'm going to make sure there's nothing there before I go charging in. So as a shooter, I want to draw that imaginary arc. And I want to set up down on that arc. So when that bull comes swinging down below the collar, I'm down there to intercept him. I'm not sitting up here on the straight line with the wind blowing down to him and he smells me as the shooter before he gets to the collar. So I set up on the arc. Then the last thing is maintain concealment and maintain control. Remember, when you set up in front of brush. Don't set up behind a tree, don't set up behind brush because you've just eliminated all of your shooting lanes. Set up in front of it, let your camouflage do its job. It's there to break up your outline, It's there to make sure that elk doesn't see you, but if you're highlighted or skylighted against a ridge, if you're set up against a solid rock and you're in camouflage and you move, he's going to see that. Set up in front of something that's going to break up your outline. Just make sure that you have shooting lanes that are going to allow that elk to walk through and conceal his eyes at some point, because you've got to draw your bow. You've got to make movements to be able to get on that elk. And if he's coming through a wide open meadow and you're set up on the edge of that meadow with nothing between you and him, you aren't going to be able to draw your bow without him seeing that movement. So set up where there's trees or brush where you think he's going to come through there, he's going to go behind that. When he does, that's when I'm going to draw. Pull out your rangefinder, it's 30 yards to that brush. When he goes behind it, I'm drawing. When he steps out, he's going to be 33 yards. Know the distance, be confident, and you're ready to get a shot at an elk. The last thing is maintain control. The elk doesn't know you're there at this point. Remember back when we located him, we said we're getting in close? We didn't bugle or anything. He doesn't know we're there. We're within 100, 150 yards of him, and he doesn't know it. We're in control at that point. We don't have to get in a hurry and flop down in a brush thicket or in an alder thicket, or we aren't going to have any shooting lanes where our chances are going to be low. Spend 30 seconds looking around. Oh, there's a good opening up there. I'm going to go set up there. Point to the collar to move back, downhill to pull the bull in. It's the collar. Your job is to pull that bull in. You've got to know where the shooter is. You've got to know where the bull is. You've got to look at where his most common path to come in is going to be, and then you've got to move to be able to pull him there. So maintain that control, and then when you're ready, it's pretty easy from there. So once we're set up, we're going to talk about calling. This, for me, is where elk hunting gets fun. Everything else is work up to this point. But when it comes to calling elk, I don't care if I'm successful at shooting it or not. If I can get in a screaming match with an elk and get that bull fired up and thinking I'm another elk, that's fun. That's been a successful day for me. When it comes to calling, I like to be efficient. I don't worry about every sound the elk makes. I don't worry about dissecting that and knowing what he's thinking. I don't worry about trying to mimic every sound he makes. I use 3 elk calls in the woods, 3 different sounds, and that's it. I like to be efficient. I like to find what works the most efficiently for me and then do that as often as I can. And it's not a 100% guaranteed success, but it's high enough that if I use that, I might have to throw in a few things here and there, but I keep it simple, because when it comes to elk hunting, there's enough things that are difficult. I like to keep the calling simple. Those 3 bulls were all killed using the same method within a 24-hour period on public land on a general over-the-counter tag in Idaho 3 seasons ago. We'd done our scouting, we knew where the elk were, we got in there, we spent 24 hours there, we packed out 3 bulls, and we came home. Incredibly, incredibly lucky. But we knew what we were doing as far as where the elk had been during the summer. We went there with one goal. We knew the elk would be there. We knew when they would be rutting. We knew the area. We'd spent all summer in there setting up trail cameras. We'd done our homework. When it comes down to it, when you do your homework and you spend the time in the off-season, it makes you much more efficient in September. So when it comes to calling, like I said, I like to keep it simple. There's 3 sounds I like to make. The first one is a basic cow sound, just a cow call. That's it. Nothing hyper-estrus or crazy, just a cow sound. Second one is a location bugle. We talked about that. It's just a simple bugle. And then the last one is the most important for getting that elk in close. It's what I call the challenge bugle. This is what it sounds like. You want to put emotion into it. So listen to the difference between it and the location bugle. Tell the difference in emotion there? I'll do the 2 back to back. Can you hear the difference in my emotion? The elk can too. And they can detect that and they know what it means. When I'm calling in an elk, there's only 2 reasons they're going to come into my bugles. The first one is to fight. And that's what I want them to do, because their guard is dropped, their eyes roll back in their head, and they come flying in to fight. The second one is to breed. So if I'm using cow calls, my goal is to bring that bull in thinking that I'm a cow and he's ready to breed. If I'm making him want to fight, I'm making him think I'm a bull and he's coming in there to either protect his cows or to steal mine. So those are only 2 emotions that they run off of in September. They're wanting to fight or they're wanting to breed. And if I can make them, make one of those emotions come out of them, I have a really good chance of getting them in close. So I play to those emotions and I'm aggressive. I very rarely play to the breeding emotion. Cow calls are great. I use them to get the bull to make a sound, but very rarely will that bull just lose it and come flying in there over a cow call. Now, if you get right in the peak of the rut, there's a bunch of bulls in there, and the bull-to-cow ratio is high, you're going to have a good success with a cow call. But you get just a standard over-the-counter area, those bulls have been pressured, you've got to get in close, and you've got to make them want to fight to come in. So the way I do that is I get set up, the collar's back behind, the shooter out in front, the collar lets out a couple cow sounds. That bull's 100, 150 yards away. He hears that cow sound. If it's September, there's a really, really good chance he's going to make a response. It might be a simple little growl. It might be a groan. It might be a chuckle. It might be a full-out scream. But typically, he's going to make a sound. And it might take you 5 minutes to get him to make a sound. But if he's there and he's hearing that cow sound, he's usually going to respond. Sometimes he'll come slipping in quiet, and that's great too. As a shooter, you have to be ready for that and listening. But my goal is to get him to make a sound. And the second he makes a sound, and I don't care what it is, I don't care if it's a lonesome chuckle, burp, grunt, glunk, whatever you want to call it, whatever sound he makes, I am going to challenge him immediately. And what I'm trying to do is make him want to fight. So I cow call, he makes the sound, and I hit him with one of these. That high, shrill note is what challenges him. I'm aggressive, I'm mad. My cow just said something, he answered and said, hey, I'm a bull, it's September, why don't you come up here? And all of a sudden this cow's boyfriend says, this is my cow. I'm challenging you. You want her, you come down here. Now if I was to bugle first and he was to answer, he would be challenging me. He'd be putting the ball in my court and saying, you just bugled on my turf, I'm challenging you to come up here. And he's going to sit there and wait. How many times we bugled at elk and they sit there and bugle back and forth, we bugle, they bugle, we bugle, they bugle. They're challenging us. They're saying, you come up here. Turn it around on them. Cow call and make them respond first. And when they do, you challenge them. And the chances of them coming into your setup is much higher than you bugling first and them challenging you. So that's my simple method for calling an elk. Cow call, they answer. When they answer, I cut them off. And I do that over and over. I might sit there 2 minutes and that bull hasn't moved. I don't bugle. I never bugle first. I will cow call again until he bugles, and then I'll challenge him. And hopefully, he's going to cut loose, and he's going to say, I've had enough, I'm coming in. And it doesn't always work like that. There's times that, that bull will hang up there, he'll have cows, the cows will be on the move, whatever reason, he doesn't come in. And we have to be, we have to be able to modify our approach and be able to be versatile in it. So here's a quick video of a hunt in Colorado, public land over the counter, September 1st, and just show you real quick. We let out a bugle. Bull answers from up the canyon about 600-700 yards, so we take off towards it. We got up where we thought we were about 120, 150 yards from him. I had my partner go back behind to set up the call, and I moved ahead up to the edge of the flat. As soon as we got set up, we looked up the hill about 60 yards, 65 yards, and the bull was up there raking his horns on a tree. We had slipped right in underneath him. He didn't know we were there, which is perfect. You hear my partner in the background challenging there. Bull had no idea we were there. We cow called. He stopped raking and bugled at us, just like we wanted. notice where the elk's looking. He's looking where my buddy was calling from. He's looking down the hill. He has no idea I'm there. He's lucky it was opening day. A decision 8 days later I would come to regret. Now look what he does. He gets elevation. He doesn't go straight down the hill to where the sound is coming from. He gets elevation where he can see down the hill. Partner set up down there calling. Bull gets to where he should be able to see the elk down there, doesn't see one. He says something's wrong. Turns and leaves. So that was it. I mean, that is what we do day in and day out when we're elk hunting. We get close, we cow call, they bugle, we cut them off. And people say, what happens if the elk aren't calling? What if they're quiet? There is an elk somewhere in my unit every single day of the season that is bugling. I'm going to find him. I'm going to cover country. I'm going to be mobile. I'm going to go find that elk that, as my partner says, is ready to die. There's a lot of times the elk are there and they just aren't ready. They aren't rutting. I can't play to their emotion of breeding or fighting. But there is an elk somewhere in that unit that very day that is playing to that emotion, and I'm going to find him. And if I can't, I'm going to keep looking until I do. And when I find that elk that's ready to die, when you set up on them like that, it makes it very, very effective. A couple other things that I like to do, a lot of times those bulls will hang up. If you have a bull with cows and he's been pushed on public land, it's tough to break him away. It's tough, even if you're playing to their emotions, it's tough to get them to say, all right, I'm coming storming in. I'm dropping my guard, rolling my eyes back in my head, I'm blowing snot out the front of my nose, and I'm coming in to fight. It's still difficult to do. So one of the things I like to do is rake a tree. I'll get set up, I'll be back behind calling, my partner will be out in front as a shooter, that bull will hang up, I'll just grab a big stick and start raking it up and down the tree like I'm an elk raking my antlers there. And there's two reasons I like to do that. The first one is it's a show of dominance. So when I start raking a tree, that bull's going to start raking a tree typically. He's showing his dominance, I'm showing mine, and sometimes it's just enough. I've challenged him, now I'm showing my dominance. He says, all right, I've had it, I'm coming in. I'm going to settle this once and for all, and he comes in. The second reason I really like it is because if I'm the shooter out in front, and my buddy's back behind me calling, and he starts raking a tree, and that bull starts raking the tree, I know exactly where that bull's at, and I can move in on him. If he's up there 80 yards from me, and he's raking a tree, his eyes are probably closed, his head's probably down, he's making noise so he can't hear, I can move up 20 yards. I can move up 40 yards. That bottom left bull there, I had my buddy back behind me 150 yards. He's quite a ways back. It's kind of open country. He's bugling. We're going back and forth with the bull. I got up from my setup, went back to him and said, hey, rake a tree. I'm going to try to slip in on it. So I went back up to where I was set up. He bugled, the bull bugled. He started raking a tree. That bull instantly started raking a tree. I moved in about 20 yards. You can see the bull up there. He was still probably 70, 80 yards from me. Quartering away from me, head down, raking a tree. Wow, this is great. Pulled out my rangefinder, walked in 20 more yards, ranged him. He was 60 yards, a little bit too far. Thought, all right, I can get closer. He's still raking the tree. He'd stop and bugle and go right back to raking the tree. I slipped into 43 yards, pulled out the rangefinder, hit it, thought, I'm confident in that shot. But he's still raking a tree. Why not get 10 more yards? So I slipped in 10 more yards, ranged him 35 yards, and I thought, this is perfect. Quartered away, didn't even know what there. I shot him, he jumped, didn't know what hit him, kind of looked around there, walked up the hill and fell over dead. I've done that so many times since then because it works so good with their ears, taken up with making the sound of breaking the tree. Their eyes are closed. As long as I have the wind in my favor, their senses are dead to me. I can move right in on him, and as long as I'm watching him and when his head comes up, I stop and don't move. It's a great opportunity to move in close to that elk. The other thing I like to use is decoys. And decoys, I wish I could explain to you why they work or why they don't work, but I can't. That same elk will come in and come running to a decoy one day, and the next day he'll see that decoy and turn it around the other way. So I don't use them as a first resort, but if I get a bull that's hung up and I think I've done everything I can, I'm going to show him something. I just use a heads-up decoy. I like to hold it out there as I'm the caller. I give a couple cow calls and hold it out so he can see it, put it back behind me. It's just enough to give him a visual reference. It's like, okay, I've been pretty cautious till now, but now I see that elk. I know there's no danger there. I'm going to go in. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But at that point, I've done everything I can. I'm taking a chance that it may or may not work. And if I get 50% success out of that, then I've added to the success of the rest of the methods I've used, and it can be a great tool. So I don't get too hung up in setting it out there and setting up on a meadow and doing any blind calling or anything, but I do use it as a visual reference to try to pull them in that last little bit. So you've done everything great. You've worked out all year. You're ready. You're confident. You go out there. You set up. You call. The bull comes in. You make a great shot. You've been practicing your bow all year. You've got the elk on the ground, and you walk up to it. What's the first thing most of us say? Now the work starts. Now the work starts. You want everything in your pack the first time. So I make sure I have a good list of everything I need when I kill an elk. It's with me at all times. I'm ready for it. But then there's still a chore ahead of you. You've got to get that thing worked up, get that meat cooled, and get it hanging in the shade so that it'll cool down and not lose any of the meat. How many of you have used the gutless method? Excellent. 3 years ago when I started talking about the gutless method, and people have been doing it, my dad's been doing it for 15 years, but 3 years ago when I asked that question in a seminar with a group about this size, one person raised their hand. And the reason so many of you raised your hand is because it's efficient. It saves time, it saves effort, and you don't have to open up the body cavity. There is no reason to open up that body cavity on an elk. So the gutless method, the goal is, you can see there, get the skin off of the entire side of the elk. Pull the front quarter off, pull the hind quarter off, pull all the rib meat off, the back straps, neck meat, brisket meat. All the meat comes off of that side entirely. You put it in game bags, hang it in the shade. Pull the hide back over, flip the elk over on the other side, take the skin off, and do the same thing over there. The guts are still inside, which is where they belong. There's no reason to open them up. You can make a little incision right along the back there, along the flank, reach in and get the tenderloins out when it's on that side. There is no lost meat at all. You get every ounce of meat that you would get by gutting it. You save the process of climbing up to your shoulders in there, reaching up to cut the trachea. You've saved all of that mess, pulling the insides out and exposing that to the meat that's there on the ground. Much cleaner, much more effective. So we've got a 60-second clip here that goes through real quick, shows you just basically step by step how the gutless method works. On our website at Elk 101, we've got about a 20-minute instructional video that's free to watch. Just go on there and watch it. It goes through the entire process. At the end of the day, it's about being confident, though. Being able to know that you're in physical shape. You can go where the elk are. You can get in there. Being confident that when you get in there, you can set up in a place that's going to give you a high percentage of calling them in. Being confident in your abilities to call. We didn't talk a whole lot about spending time calling in the off-season, but it's a great time to drive your wife crazy. It's a great time to practice. Great time to get better. Be confident so you know that when that bull comes in and you've got to stop him with the cow call in front of you, you aren't going to sound like a duck. You're going to sound like a cow elk, and he's going to hear that and stop and look at you. It's a great time during the off-season to look at topo maps, to look at Google Earth, to scout your area from home, to learn the area, to look at it and say, what are the thermals doing here? So when you go out there, you know with a good degree of confidence what the thermals are doing and what you need to do to get into where the elk are and be successful. Most importantly, afterwards, don't ruin the elk hunting experience because you aren't ready for what lies ahead. It is a chore. I'm not going to lie to you. Putting a quarter of an elk on your back or a half of an elk on your back and carrying it out of the woods, I don't care how flat it is or how steep it is, it's work. Even if you only have to go a half a mile, be ready for it. Have everything in your gate or in your backpack you need to get that elk up and cooled quickly so that you don't lose any meat. You get it out quickly and safely. Be confident in that so that it doesn't ruin the experience at the end of the day. Then the last thing I'll talk real briefly on is gear. I'm not going to stand up here and say you need to use this gear. People ask me all the time, what's the best backpack? What's the best boots? What's the best elk call? And I say, for me, I can tell you what I use, but that doesn't mean it's going to be the best for you. You need to find out, and now's a great time to find out, what works the best for you. I can tell you that my Hanwag boots are the best boots in the world. But if they don't fit your feet, and you get blisters on your feet because the shape of the boot's different than the shape of your foot, they're not the best boot for you. If I've got a backpack that I say I can carry 120 pounds in it, it's comfortable as can be, but your torso is built different, or you need a different setup on a backpack, it's not the best backpack for you. I can tell you this elk call is the best elk call in the world. It makes the most realistic elk sounds out there, but if you put it in your mouth and gag on it, or you put it in your mouth and can't make good sounds out of it, it's not the best elk call for you. So spend this time of the year finding out what gear works for you. What's most critical? Boots, sleeping bags, things that are actually essential to your hunt. You go out there on a bivvy hunt, and you have a 30-degree bag and it's 45 degrees and you shiver all night in it, it's not a 30-degree bag for you and it's not the best bag for you. You're going to wake up the next morning tired and not motivated to get up in the frost and get outside and get going and hiking and warm up. You're going to want to stay in that sleeping bag and shiver for a couple more hours. Find the gear that works for you. Find the gear that works for the style of hunting you do. Test it in the off season. Go on a backpacking trip in the summer with your kids. Make sure that gear works. Make sure it's going to function. I bought a brand new pack frame a couple years ago, all excited about it, took it out, threw half of an elk on it. My buddy took off down the hill. I put that elk on it, and I went and I stood up. All the buckles snapped on that pack frame. 3.5 miles from my truck, buckles broken on a pack frame with half an elk on it. It wasn't the best pack frame for me. Test it out before, know what its capabilities are, know what you need, and find the gear that will make you confident. Any questions?
You talked a little bit about elk habits. Do you find that they tend to bed generally in the same area and water and feed in the same area, or do they have a larger area?
It's a great question. So elk habits, do they bed in the same area? Do they feed and water in the same area? Typically, they're going to be in the same general area. Now, where we hunt in Idaho, there's wolves there. They change their habits dramatically. They're very dynamic. They're constantly moving. They aren't as vocal as they are. So it makes, we have to second guess a lot of times. They were here yesterday. They aren't here today. What happened? As far as bumping them out, it takes quite a bit of pressure to bump an elk out, unless they're in just a tiny little patch where it's like this is the only place of security they have. If you get in there and bump them out, they might go for a few miles and then they're not going to be there. But day in and day out, if you watch an elk during late August, early September, that herd of cows is doing the same thing every day. They're coming off the same ridge, they're feeding in the same meadow, they're going back up and bedding on the same bench on the north-facing slope there. They're very consistent. When that bull comes in there, he's not going to change their methods a whole lot. He's coming down to find the cows, he's waiting for the rut to kick in, and he's probably going to follow them. So, yeah, they're fairly consistent, but again, there's a lot of variables that come into play. Other hunters bumping them out of there, a lot of pressure in the area, predators, different things like that.
What's your favorite state to hunt elk?
Wyoming, Colorado, Idaho, Arizona, Oregon. I love hunting elk. An elk bugle in any state, and as long as I can find an elk to bugle, I love hunting it. We're from Idaho. Until about 3 years ago, I'd only hunted out of state one time, so my only experience was in Idaho. The last couple of years, we've been fortunate. We drew a general tag in Wyoming, hunted over the counter in Colorado. So I've been a few more places, and as long as there's elk there bugling, I love hunting them. And it's tough anywhere you go. It's hard work. Some of the hunts that I think are going to be the most enjoyable and the easiest and the biggest bulls, I drew a Book Cliffs tag in Utah last year. Sounds awesome. My dad hunted it 2 years before. They were seeing 390-inch bulls. I had my expectations all high. I called in 3 bulls in 80 days.
Tough hunt.
It was a tough hunt.
Yeah, it is.
Utah's not my favorite state to hunt anymore. But I don't have a favorite state. I primarily hunt Idaho, and it's a lot of fun. And anywhere I can get an elk tag, go hunt. It's great.
I have a lot of public land, but I love hunting broad, but other hunters will bump elk into me or I'll bump elk and they take off. What's the likelihood of ever finding them elk again, either that day or ever?
Yeah. And that goes back to their habits. If they get bumped, and it's the first time they've been bumped, and there's good feed there, and they know there's water there, and you have to go for several miles to find water, they're probably going to come back by necessity. If there's water everywhere, and there's green hillsides, and good heavy timber for them to bed in everywhere, they don't have to come back there. They know other places they can go, and they're going to go and get away from that pressure. So it's tough hunting public land with other hunters. You're sharing that with them, and they're bumping elk, you're bumping elk, and those elk are very dynamic, and being able to get in consistently and stay on those elk can be tough, because they are, if they get bumped, they will go to a new area if there's other areas available that'll suit their needs. Any other questions?
How often do you use the call, and how do you determine, I realize you hit it back after they've already used, but in your location calls, a lot of times you find that we'll push them out, actually.
Sure.
They don't want to fight, they just want to take your cows and run.
And that's why it's really important not to threaten them with your location bugle. You don't want to challenge them. You want it to be that long, drawn-out, real lazy, just... There's nothing about that says I want to fight. It's just saying I'm an elk up here. Elk are very communicative animals. They're a vocal animal, and for them to hear another bugle doesn't necessarily threaten them, especially at a long distance. You get in close to them and start bugling, they're going to get bumped, and that's why I like to get really close. I don't like to bugle from 300 yards because I'm starting to make them uncomfortable. and there's a good chance they're going to take their cows and leave. But if I get within 120 yards of them, and I bugle, and I challenge them, they're going to fight. Very rarely are they going to grab their cows and take off, but very rarely are their cows going to take off at that point. But if you do it from 300 yards, it's a completely different scenario. So as far as how often I bugle, location bugles, I will bugle every time I get to a point where my bugle is going to reach somewhere it didn't reach before. So I like to get on a big main ridge and just go up it and get into a basin where there's draws on both sides. I'll bugle off both sides. If nothing, I'll get on the main ridge and go another 100 yards, 400 yards, whatever it is, to where I can bugle into a different drainage or a different draw and hit somewhere I might not have hit before. So I bugle a lot, and once we get set up and calling that elk, I'm very aggressive. I want to make him talk, and I want to get him fired up and fighting as quickly as I can.
When you're scouting preseason, the bulls typically with the bulls and the cows in a different area, how are you deciding where you want to be come hunting season? Because they're going to move to find each other, and just what are your techniques in scouting to find that bull that you saw earlier in the season? Go after him, when it's September.
Sure, great question. So when I'm hunting public land, over-the-counter tags, I'm usually not trying to find a specific bull. I'm usually not going out and scouting and saying, that's the bull I want to find, because typically I'm not finding that trophy bull, that 350-inch bull. I'm just looking for a nice representative bull of the area. Might be a 5x5, might be a small 6-point. Whatever it is, I'm typically not trying to pinpoint one bull and hunt. If I'm hunting something like the Book Cliffs or something like Unit 1 or Unit 9 in Arizona, I'm probably going to spend a little bit more time with the trail camera trying to find a specific bull or a couple bulls and put them as a targeted animal. But 99% of my hunting is just public land, do it yourself. I just want to find a bull. And so what I look for, I'm scouting in the summer, is groups of cows. I don't look for bulls at all, because like you say, during the summer the bulls are off by themselves in bachelor herds. The cows are typically at lower elevations where they have their calves. They stay down there all summer, and then right as the rut's kicking in, those bulls come out of the high country, they split up, and they start finding those herds of cows. So what I'm looking for all summer is herds of cows. And that picture where we shot those 3 bulls in 24 hours, we had a group of about 60 cows on our trail camera all summer. We had 3 spikes, and that was it. But that day happened, and the magic started, and the rut kicked in, and those big bulls came out of the mountains around there, and they showed up we shot all 3 of those bulls within 400 yards of where that trail camera was also. I never had a single picture of a bull other than 3 spikes on the trail camera in 4 months of the trail camera being out. So I look for groups of cows, and I try to hunt where the cows are, because I know that's where the bulls are going to show up. All right, we've probably got to wrap up here. We've got some product in the back on the table. We have some elk calls. Those of you who haven't subscribed to Extreme Elk Magazine, it's a magazine that we publish. It's 100% elk hunting, just regular guys. Just do-it-yourself public land hunts. It's great content, great stories. Makes you relate to elk hunting, helps the off-season go by a little bit faster. If you haven't subscribed, we've got a great deal here. We've got some magazines in the back. We've got a booth in the exhibit, booth 610. Swing by, say hi. Love to chat elk with all of you some more. And we'll head back to the booth or back in the back here, and appreciate you guys all coming out.